Всем привет и добро пожаловать на очередное видео.
Today I'm going to be showing you all how to make Russian post-punk type beats. My other post-punk tutorial kind of focused more on the Cure, like indie style post-punk, but Russian post-punk has a very distinctively different sound to it. So the main influence for this video, and probably the most well-known band in this particular genre, is a band called Molchat Doma. Sounds ominous. And I feel like it's worth mentioning that they're actually not from Russia, they're from Belarus, but they've been a huge inspiration for the whole post-punk scene in that area, and Belarus is like right there. They're pretty close. So this particular genre is very well known for using Lindrum drum sounds. All the tracks have a very dark and ambient kind of feel to them, and they usually have a mixture of different guitar melodies layered with darker synth sounds. But anyways, let's start making this beat here. So jumping into the DAW, I'm going to be using FL Studio, but all these tips will apply to whatever DAW you use as well. The first thing we want to do is pull up some Lindrum sounds. You can pretty much just look up Lindrum drum pack and you'll find something that you can use. Inside of my vintage drum kit, I also have a bunch of sounds that would work well for this. This kick here is basically a Lindrum kick, but just made a little bit better. So as you can see, I did grab quite a few sounds, but really all you need is kick, snare, a couple percussion sounds, and then maybe a hi-hat. For the BPM, we want these beats to be relatively fast. So pretty much around 160 will be good. There are some Molchat Doma songs that are a little bit slower, but we're just going to go with the 160 vibe. Sometimes you might hear a 4 on the floor kick pattern, but it's more common to hear a pattern more like this, or like this. Just gonna do more like a boom ch boom boom ch kind of thing. And with the snare drum, I find that it sounds a little bit better if you pitch it down a little bit. So we're just gonna pitch it down like 200 cents. And now we're gonna fill this bad boy out with a little bit of percussion. A very common thing you'll hear is a little percussive hit with the congas like this. If you know the genre and you've heard a Molchat Doma song, you probably recognize that already. So throw a couple of those in there, but obviously don't go too crazy with it. And then with the claps, we're just gonna do like a little, I think sometimes we'll end off the pattern like this. And then sometimes I'll switch it up and do this. Then we'll just throw in a couple cowbell hits and that'll be pretty much good for the percussion. And with just this right here, we already have a very solid Russian post-punk type drum pattern. Now as far as the hi-hats, sometimes you can do a little two-step pattern. If you are doing this though, make sure you lower the velocity of every other hit. Another common thing you might hear with the hat pattern is like a double timed version of this, which I think would be like 16th notes or something kind of like this, which might sound good depending on your track and what you're going for. You can get that really easily by doing Control A and then shift clicking this over, then hit Alt and scroll down all the way, and then do Alt and scroll up a little bit. What you can also do is hit Alt R to randomize all the velocities. Another thing you may want to add in is some tom hits. So if you grab some tom sounds like this, you can kind of just add them in here and there throughout the pattern, and at the end maybe do a little fill type thing. So another thing you might also hear is switching from a hi-hat to a ride during the chorus of the song. You can do a two-step pattern, or if you want to, you can also do a four-step pattern. And that sounds equally as good. It just kind of depends on your track and the pacing you want to go for. And then last but not least, we're just going to put a little crash at the beginning. And that right there is a solid little Russian post-punk drum pattern. So one important characteristic of the whole Russian post-punk sound is the very lo-fi, old, vintagey, tapey kind of quality to everything. You might hear some songs that have clipping and clashing going on and just a whole lot of unprofessional qualities to them, but that's kind of what gives this genre the character that people love about it so much. In a lot of genres, that rawness, that realness is what makes the music so enjoyable to listen to. Basically what I'm trying to say is we're going to put RC20 on this thing. So let's take all the drums, do Control L, then we're going to control and click over all of them, right click on an empty mixer, route to this track only, and that sends them all to a bus. So anything that we put onto this bus is going to affect all of the drum sounds, and we'll make it yellow for school bus color. We're just going to click drum break 1 for this and then adjust the settings a little bit. You don't have to use RC20 for this. You can use isotope vinyl or Kramer tape or whatever other lo-fi plugin you want. Two of the actual important things here, we're going to have a cut in the high end, as you can see down here, and we're going to have a little boost in the low end. We also have the tube distort thing turned up a little bit as well. So that's pretty big money action right there, because now we can move on to the bass guitar. Look at my cool strap. It has flowers on it. It's dope. You don't really need a bass for this. You can use some sort of bass plugin or one-shots or something like that because the bass lines are so easy, but I have a bass right here, so I'm just going to use it. And this is a bit unconventional, but for these beats, I like to start with bass and then build everything else around it just because the bass lines are so important. So with these bass lines, one of the most important things is just building kind of an ominous foundation to build your beat off of. And one way that I like to do that is playing bass notes that are a half step apart. So like, You can hear how much tension that creates with those two notes playing next to each other because it's not resolving, it's not going anywhere that feels satisfying, so it feels like a little disjointed. But just do whatever seems right for your track, whatever feels post-punky. Also, I should mention when you're playing, you kind of want to play more back here towards the bridge because it gets your bass a little bit more of a nasally sound, and I find you'll hear that a lot in Russian post-punk stuff. And honestly, that's pretty much all we need for bass. So starting with bass is actually pretty nice because now we kind of have an idea for how to build everything around the track. We have root notes for all the guitar parts, and we can kind of just build out from there. So naturally, the next thing we're going to do is grab our guitar. And we're really just going to start building melodies on top of the bass line. Because a lot of times these beats don't really have a proper chord progression where you're doing something like... They like to have melodies stacked on top of each other to create one nice big guitar layer. So one common guitar melody thing you might hear is just these repetitive one-note melody kind of things. So I'm going to add something like that, but I'm going to record it twice so that we can double track, pin one to the left and one to the right. And this is mainly going to be something that we play for the choruses. And now I'm just going to mess around and see what other melodies I can come up with. It's better to record more and not use certain things than not record enough and then have a really thin track with no layers. I'm going to do one melody just following the root notes of the bass, but then I'm going to go up a fifth. I think a fifth. Then I'm also going to do a little harmonic melody in there. Then I'm also just going to do a standard little lead line with a bunch of reverb on it. That's something you'll hear a lot, guitar leads that are just drenched in reverb. Solid. Not bad. Alright, so once you have enough guitar melodies to where you've beefed up your track enough, but it doesn't feel like overwhelming and overcrowded, we can pretty much move on to the last element of these beats, which is adding a couple synthy sounds. I'm going to be using a plugin called Analog Lab, which I highly recommend because it's a great plugin, but you can use any free plugin that works for you or a real hardware synth if you got one. I don't, so we're going with the plugin version. There are a bunch of different synthesizers that get used in the Molchat Doma songs. Little Moog action, little DX7 action, little Prophet 5 action. So what I like to do is just search presets for those synths in Analog Lab and then pick some sounds from there. I'm going to find one that's kind of like a synth pad and then one that's like a bell type sound. This VHS strings preset is going to be perfect for the pad sound. It already has some of that lo-fi character going on, so it's going to be absolutely perfect. And I just found this preset called Campfire, which is going to be a perfect bell sound. For the strings, I'm just doing a little pattern that follows the bass line at first. But then at the end, it changes up and creates a little more tension. For the bell sound, we just got this little vibe going on. And now we pretty much have all of the elements that we're going to need to actually build this beat. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about the mixing, but not too heavily. I pretty much already showed you guys what we did with the drums. I'm going to use the DBX 160 in mono because these drums should be in mono. DBX 160 is one of my absolute favorite plugins. It's an amazing drum compressor. I think I have it linked in the description below if you want to check it out. We're just going to turn the threshold way up, turn the compression down quite a bit, and then turn the output gain up a bit. And that just gives the drums a lot more punch, almost a little bit of distortion in there, which kind of just adds to the overall lo-fi feel. And then also, do not forget, we got to add a little bit of reverb in here. So I'm going to use TrueVerb on this. TrueVerb is a great reverb plugin because you can change the size of the room, distance of the microphone to the sound source, all that reverby kind of stuff, and it's just a very good realistic reverb. I'll link that in the description below as well. And we want this to be a relatively small reverb, not anything too crazy. We'll probably even turn this reverb down a little bit. And then we're actually going to give the snare specifically its own little reverb as well. For this, I'm just going to use the regular fruity reverb. For the bass, I just do a little EQ and compression, and then all the guitars pretty much have CLA guitars, some EQ, and some reverb on them. All of the synths are going to have a little bit of a high cut, and then on the master track, that's really the most important thing, we're going to put more RC20. But this time, we're going to use the preset Cassette Generation 1, I think it's called. Cassette First Generation. Turn the noise way down, the distort way down quite a bit, and then make the EQ not so extreme. And then really the last part of the beat we're going to focus on is going to be the layout of the track. First of all, the drums are going to stay pretty much the same throughout the whole track. If you want to, you can literally just loop the same 4 to 8 bars bars over and over throughout the whole thing, but I personally find that some of the percussion stuff tends to get a bit repetitive, so I'd recommend at certain parts taking out like the congas or the cowbell or whatever, or just changing up the pattern like every 8 to 16 bars. And then of course you want to go back and forth between no hi-hats, then hi-hats during like a verse or whatever, and then ride during the chorus. And then other than that, just swap out the different guitar melodies and synth melodies during different parts of the song. Just make the choruses a little bit thicker with more melodies, make the verses a little bit thinner, add some bridges in there where it's very thin, maybe just bass or something like that. Do all that a couple times and you're pretty much good to go. You got your Russian post-punk track. So honestly, that's pretty much going to do it for me in this one here today. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, learn how to make a little Russian post-punk type vibe. If you want to check out any social medias or drum kits or anything, link is down in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time.